late May or so to about September for Pigeon Lake. We can see that the concentrations in the North Saskatchewan River are quite a bit higher. So does this eliminate that option? Well, maybe for the summertime, like open water periods, at least it does, and you can maybe focus more on the ice covered season. So, you know, a fairly simple, straightforward assessment to sort of say, okay, well, you know, when should or when is possibly feasible to transfer water from North Saskatchewan into Pigeon Lake? You can see, well, maybe the summertime isn't the best period for that. The other thing to note, of course, is that we don't have under ice data for Pigeon Lake. We've only got, maybe in the whole history of our monitoring, we might have like 3 or 4 samples from under ice conditions. So we're really kind of lacking in some of that information. So if we are looking at going forward and pursuing in-lake management options during the ice covered period, we obviously need to build up our data set for Pigeon Lake as well. Surface sediment dredging. So dredging exposed to surface sediments from Pigeon Lake is kind of noted that there is definitely a store of phosphorus in the sediments. And the concept here is reducing internal loading in Pigeon Lake by removing the phosphorus-laden surface sediments and disposing of those off-site. Well, we looked at our sediment data that we had, and so we split up when we collected our sediment samples. And this is the phosphorus concentration. We split it up into the 0 to 10 centimeters for the core, and then from the 10 to the low for the core. 0 to 10 centimeters, because we know that that's typically the active layer of the sediment, which is releasing phosphorus to the overlying water column. Below 10 centimeters, it's essentially formed a cap, and you're not getting that chemical interaction with the overlying water column. Well, we see the concentrations are fairly similar, whether you're in the surface or whether you're down deeper. So what does that mean? Well, if you remove that upper 10 centimeters, if you're just doing shallow surface dredging, remove that upper 10 centimeters, you're exposing sediment that's down below that has the same concentration. So it's likely going to become reactivated and start releasing that phosphorus again at around the same rate as what it is currently. So if you're going to look at something like a dredging option, you're probably going to want to go down towards like the bedrock to make sure that you're eliminating any of the sediment altogether. So again, not you know, eliminating it completely, but just sort of saying, you know, these are things to keep in mind when you're looking at these kind of options. And the last is the transfer of groundwater into the lake. So this is pumping groundwater from nearby aquifers into Pigeon Lake. So again, the concept is that the groundwater would have lower phosphorus content relative to lake, therefore pumping it into Pigeon Lake would dilute lake phosphorus concentrations. When we look at our total phosphorus, and this is the other thing you were asking about, Alfred, in terms of the concentrations for dissolved and orthophosphate. You can see the groundwater here over on the left. The lake is the one in the middle for the box whisker plot. You can see the total phosphorus concentrations, at least in 2013, were quite similar in the groundwater as compared to the lake. So again, you either have to pay close attention to what you're doing on a year-to-year basis, or you have to find a groundwater source from maybe somewhere else that does have that lower phosphorus concentration as compared to the lake itself.
What depth was that groundwater sample?
They varied. Everywhere from, I think it was from about 10 meters down to about 80 meters or so deep. So it had quite a bit of variability in terms of the depth. So I mean that you know, again, as I said, it's not necessarily eliminating the options outright, but it is some of that information that you should be putting forward and taking forward when you're considering any kind of these the inlet options. So where do we go from here? So looking beyond the surface, the groundwater and air monitoring that we're planning on doing in this upcoming year, we're going to do some more groundwater monitoring as well as some air monitoring to have that local data for Pigeon Lake as needed. We need to complete the nutrient budget and paleolimnology work, so the reports will be coming out this year. There'll be some predictive modeling work for the bathtub work for Pigeon Lake. It's being done this year as well. We're going to complete the water quality overview report. So that's taking all of 2013. We realize we collected a ton of data in 2013, so it's going to be its own standalone report as well. We're going to continue to work, obviously, with the APLM and PLWA to examine, recommend, monitor, and implement measures to maintain improved water quality at Pigeon Lake based on sound data. So working with PLWA to look at watershed management options, working with the APLM to examine the in-lake options. And then there's obviously other ongoing work, such as work with Alberta Health Services, Alberta Health, for the beach monitoring program, that sort of thing, and then other agencies and government branches. So it's, it's going to be multi-agencies for looking at this issue and looking at options that we can use to improve the water quality in Pigeon Lake. So in summary,
Chris,
yeah.
can you just, sorry, I failed to introduce the bathtub concept earlier when I was doing my talk. Can you elaborate that?
It's more or less kind of a conceptual model. Takes kind of all your inputs as well as what's coming from in the lake itself. Kind of says in general, well, if we reduced concentrations, nutrient concentrations by 50% from coming from the watershed and going into the lake, what is the concentration going to look like in the lake over time? So it's very broad in terms of what kind of changes, but it really kind of gives a good. It really gives a good. A good overview for people to sort of say, okay, well, if we do this in the watershed, what kind of changes would we expect to sort of see in terms of the lake concentration? So again, give some realistic expectations for people for looking at the options, whether it's watershed management or in lake options. In summary, Pigeon Lake, very large lake, so it does present some challenges. There's been more frequent and intense blooms, and that's led to evolution response in our management, so the focus is on production of nutrients. Watershed management must be done enhanced by in-lake treatment where feasible. We've been moving from the characterization to monitoring to support exploration of those management options. There's been numerous focused studies undertaken to provide answers to these management questions. Where are the nutrients coming from? How long until a change is expected? And what caused the changes that we are observing in the lake? The next step is to begin implementing those management measures and moving to monitoring the response of the lake. One of the key things, of course, is that you need patience. Management measures that result in small changes can take many years to see a change in the lake. So we need to really temper our expectations that it's not going to be something that's solved in 1 year, but it is going to be. It's something that's taken a long time for us to arrive at this point. It's going to take a while before we really see significant changes in the lake. So I think that's it. Yep.
Chris?
Yep.
Just 2 questions. One of your earlier graphs showed these spikes in Pigeon Lake water input versus output.
Yep.
I'm assuming the spikes were the spring that discharged through
There's-
the aquifer and runoff.
There, in terms of, well, those are for the streams, and yeah, I mean, there's spikes in the springtime when we get we get all the melt and we get a lot of water flushing off the land and into the lake, and then you get spikes in the summertime during storm events as well.
But the end result was that the water level in Pigeon Lake is declining over some period of time, as per your last slide on that. So really what it is, it's like many lakes in Alberta, it's declining in the quantity of water that's in the lake.
Overall, yeah, I mean, it does vary, as I showed with that, the water level does vary on an annual basis. And yes, typically what we see is, yes, from sort of snow melt and spring runoff, that's when the water levels in the lakes tend to come up, and then they tend to decline over the course of the summer as evaporation really kicks into gear.
But I think that's what the Worley Parsons report tells us, is that the long-term trend is going to be for a decreasing water quality in Pigeon Lake at the measurement point of the fall of each year. You know, we got any spring runoff, be done with any rain that may come in, and we're going to end up with a lower water quantity. Pardon me. The other point is, my family now has been on this lake since 1950. Amio, Silver Beach, Argentia, and Itasca. And I really question the 1950 on data to about 1985, 1986 as really should be almost like a non-existent or very questionable, because I don't recall, and this isn't very scientific, but you sort of know what you've been in, what you've been fishing in, and how you've been enjoying the lake. And I don't recall any situation like what we experienced when we hit the year 2000. So there's a 50-year gap there that I think is very questionable. That development around the lake has taken from that time to the point we are today to put us into the situation that we're into.
Well, and that's why we're doing the paleolimnology, because obviously we don't have the data from 1950 to around 1980 to really sort of say, well, yes, that there were these changes in phosphorus concentrations and what have you. So the paleolimnology, what it does is it does use a number of proxies. It uses pigments, it uses, we're using microfossils, so the diatoms that are and looking for those shifts in the communities that signal a change in the phosphorus concentration, signal a change in the productivity in the lake. So sort of see, okay, well, from pre-European times to the present, what has been the change in the lake?
Now, my first experience with Jay White was when NEDL asked you to do a report. I didn't see that listed in the reports that Chris had there on what the impact of the sewage line that went into the north side was having on Pigeon Lake. I remember one specific line you had in there, Jay, which said that the gains from the north side were being offset by the south side. And I just found it interesting, Chris, that there was no reference to the work that Jay had done there, because that, to us on the NEPL, that was a very significant overview of what it is that NEPL was having on the lake and the need to push the drive to get a sewer system totally around the lake, which several of us have been committed to for the last, we started that line in about 1990, and that's a long story, so I'm not gonna take you all through it. But we're not successful in getting that project pulled together and happening, but I just found it was interesting that that study was not shown on the list.
You know, I wasn't even aware that Jay had done that. And Jay, as you said, he didn't even point out himself that he had done that, but I mean.
Well, I had to pay his bill, so I remember it.
Well, there you go, yeah. I mean, the point is that, yes, the estimated how much sewage is currently coming into the lake with the development of that southern, the south part line, that should essentially eliminate that from that whole nutrient budget. In terms of numbers, I think it's about 160 kilograms of phosphorus per year, so what we can estimate. And that's, you know, essentially just from faulty, non-working systems that are around the lake currently. So get rid of those.
I'm going to challenge you on that, because I really think that there's a fair number of people, and I was making this point with the in-water people. We're making a presentation to our council meeting last week, that there are a fair number of, and this data is available, but I am not going to open the door as to where it is. It's available, but I certainly have access to it and can see it. But there are a fair number of gray water systems on the south side. So the way the gray water system works is that you pour a 45-gallon drum into the ground, and you run your dishwasher, you run your shower water, and you run your sink water into the gray water setup that you have. That infiltrates into the lake. There's nothing to stop it. It can only go one place. It's 100 feet from the lake shore. The only thing that goes into the septic tanks is any hard sewage that comes through the toilets. It's very easy to determine what that is, because we know how many people pump out in every summer village and what particular lots are providing a sewage pump out and the frequency. So I think there's a lot of work to be done on the on land. I'm not totally confident that they've addressed all the issues there.
Well, I mean, you're right that, I mean, if you can get rid of some of the stormwater, but I mean, that ends up getting included, or the gray water, that ends up being included in that diffuse runoff. So obviously the PLWA is looking at strategies for reducing that watershed load from coming into the lake. Like right now, I know that they've been working pretty extensively on developing the fertilizer bylaw, which would be included. The fertilizer would be in that diffuse runoff that's coming into the lake. Same thing with the gray water, that would be covered in that as well. So, you know, in terms of sewage, that's just sewage itself, like sewage is going into a septic tank.
One of the kinds of things that needs to be given some consideration, and that is the changing character of the sediments in the lake. You know, when we talk about the the phosphorus concentration and the availability of phosphorus developed within the lake, it's worth observing that the sediments that are available to provide phosphorus to the water column is much greater in distribution than it was historically. And I could say that going back, say, 50 years, and this is personal observation, there were great amounts of regrowth around the lake that have since disappeared and provided places where people have built cottages. And those reed beds along the shore were where the what I call silt concentrations were significant. And I live on Sandholm, and from the point of the lake, we walked out through sandbar after sandbar after sandbar. There was zero bottom sediments, none. And consequently, there was limited weed growth, and it was very much different. The same thing would apply at Argentia, which is the baby before Malters, where it was nothing but river and sand going up. The same thing applied at Manio. But as those weed beds disappeared, and by the way, I can also say we used to go down to the reeds to just be in a different atmosphere, get out of the boat and sink down past our knees in the sediment. Those reed beds disappeared and the sediment spread throughout the lake. That provided